All right, pinball time. Hell yeah. Here we go. Up. Oh, look at that. He's a pinball wizard. There has to be a twist. Pinball wizard got cartridges and discs. How do you think he does it? He doesn't really do it. His scores aren't very good. Oh, son of a bitch. You kiss my ass.
The main game I want to show you today is simply named Pinball, a cassette released by Lizard Games in 1983 that appears to be lost in time for all intents and purposes. Now, pinball is not great. It's written in Extended Basic and designed to work in 16K, so there are some serious limitations as to what it can do. But I feel like to appreciate how technically ambitious and ultimately interesting it is, you have to look backward and forward. So this is going to turn into a history of TI-99 4A pinball. Now I am indebted to Pixel Pedant, YouTuber and basic coder extraordinaire, who already covered a lot of this ground on an excellent video some time ago. In fact, if I didn't have Lizard's pinball game to show you, I probably wouldn't have bothered with any of this. But let's take a look back, way back, to the TI-99-4, the 4A's predecessor, released in 1979 with a truly archaic early library of video game cartridges produced by Milton Bradley. This was far enough back that just showing blinky lights and bold brassy sounds was distracting enough to the caveman families gathered round the floor model Zenith Color TV. For most people, the TI was the next thing they saw after Pong, so their minds would have been blown by just about anything. Even Zero Zap. Now, I've been called a troll on message boards for saying out loud that Zero Zap sucks so bad, it's not even actually a game. Sometimes being right is a lonely mission. But in poor Zero Zap's defense, nowhere in the game itself does it refer to itself as pinball anything. Some marketing dingus at TI wrote box copy about its quote-unquote pinball action, and the genre tag stuck, despite it being more like bad pachinko than anything else. And not even really that. You move an arrow, launch it, and it bounces off some big colorful numbers until it hits a zero or comes back down. And that's it! That's the game! Now I will say on record that I love the look of Zero Zap. And there's a board editor that I guess could be fun for a minute, trying to create some perpetual motion machine for your arrow, but all the cool sound effects and big analog scoreboards and classical music riffs can't hide the fact that if your parents dropped $40 in 1979 money on this piece of crap, your 99.4 wound up in a box in the attic real quick. And your only other option besides that was the equally primitive Video Games 1, a compilation of 3 programs too lame to even get their own cartridge in a time when Zero Zap made the cut. In addition to Pot Shot, an admittedly cute little shooting gallery game, and Doodle, which is fun for about 15 seconds, you get a game actually called Pinball. And it's closer. It's more pinball-esque. But it's got a moving paddle at the bottom, not 2 flippers, so guess what this game is not? It's got some pinball-like target goals to hit, and the physics are at least easy to figure out, if a bit nonsensical. 1979 pinball plays like someone in the Soviet Union got a computer, had someone describe actual pinball to them over the phone, and then just went to town making it. A lot of old games get by on warm, fuzzy nostalgia, but 1979 pinball ain't one of them. A few years later, other platforms had gotten titles like Raster Blaster, Pinball Construction Set, and David's Midnight Magic, which was at least on the TI drawing board until the computer was discontinued. But not until 1985 did another American TI pinball title surface, this time in the form of John Benke's Fireball. Now this game swung for the fences, with a good-looking table and even a layout editor. But the slow speed and response time and spotty collision detection of Extended Basic made this another one that, although it came closest to looking and working like actual pinball, kind of felt like playing some other weirder off-brand version of the experience. It might have been argued that this was as close as the language was going to get to pinball, but it still didn't quite feel like pinball. Thankfully, 1985 also gave us Micro Pinball from Software Specialties, briefly released on disc before that company went belly up, and later released on cartridge by Data Biotics. Now this is more like it. The board's a little sparse, but it looks like pinball, it acts like pinball, and it's got a ton of replay value. This is fast, it's responsive, and the physics are the best we've seen so far. I have to wonder if any of that unreleased David's Midnight Magic code made it into this build, although it looks a little more like Raster Blaster. This one's just a lot of fun. It's another mid-80s Hall of Famer from the TI's early days as an orphaned platform. The version on cartridge is Micro Pinball 2, which adds a few improvements to the table and to the ball physics, along with providing a leaderboard for scores. Now it might be all in my head, but it seems to me like the flippers respond even better on real iron than they do in emulation. But either way, this game was a quantum leap. For the first time, a pinball game on the TI was actually simulating the pinball experience. Was this as good as it could get? "37 years later, in 2022, Rasmus Mostgaard, one of the current scene's most accomplished programmers, dropped Pinball 99, with a table based on the early 90s Amiga game changer Pinball Dreams. Now, before you check, yes, this is still the same video, and yes, that's a TI-99 4A executing a scrolling playfield, lush music with pitch bends, and spirited computer speech. I actually thought this game used modern-day enhancements to the base 99 4A's memory and graphics, but in researching, I'm seeing reports of people playing this as is on stock TI hardware with 32K memory expansion, which I think means Rasmus is some kind of magician or possibly an elder god. I'm fairly certain that if you showed Pinball 99 to the people making games like Zero Zap and Video Games 1 and told them it was the same computer they were plunking away on, they would have told you to get your lion ass out of Texas and take your stupid time machine with you. This game is an unbelievable feat and another example of a golden age of new things to do with our beloved TIs. There are a lot of goals to chase on this table. Hitting bumpers, locking the ball, and executing ramps all collect TI-specific cartridges or peripheral items like an F-18A video upgrade or a 32K card. This game is tough, in that way that makes you ask yourself, is the ball too easy to lose or do I just suck at this? But it's a feast for the senses, just a fantastic piece of programming, and another amazing addition to Rasmus's body of work. Now, speaking of time travel, let's head back. Remember pinball? I mean, I know we're talking about pinball, but specifically that pinball game from the UK. The one that was supposed to be the point of this entire video? Before micro pinball, but after Zero Zap, and during the brief but shining era of the UK cassette tape. There's no date on pinball, but I'm going to assume it was 1983. By all accounts, the TI didn't sell well in the UK, and Extended Basic even less so. So my guess is pinball didn't move a lot of units, despite being packaged with a bonus memory game called Qubits. The cassette insert promises, quote, the most realistic pinball game you'll ever see, which is some world-bestriding hubris. But I gotta say, there is something compelling about this game. They kept the presentation to a minimum. No title screen or flashy songs, and the table itself is pretty bare bones. And the ball in play does some real weird things that take getting used to, like, it's sorta... my term for it is fast forwarding, if that makes sense. Like, it hits a target and then skips ahead to where it should be a second or two later. It's hard to explain unless you see it on the screen. But somehow, even with that, or maybe because of that, who knows, the physics of this game actually feel right. The flipper response is as slow as you'd expect from Extended Basic, so the subtle art of catching a ball in the crook of the flipper like you can do on micro pinball is a lost cause here. You mash the button a second or two before you need to, and you thwack the ball back into play, using the flippers as very blunt instruments. But once you get into the rhythm of it, it is surprisingly enjoyable. Now, I know that kind of contradicts what I was saying about the other attempts at pinball earlier, but this one, despite its limitations and weirdness, still gives off a pinball vibe and makes me feel like I'm playing a table. Its issues feel more like quirks than flaws, and it makes me want to keep playing to get better at the flow of the game, figure it all out, and rack up some scores. As far as sheer playability goes, I would put this one up there almost with micro pinball itself, but I would totally get it if you didn't agree. Thanks for coming along and playing the silver ball, or whichever of the TI's 16 colors is the best substitute for silver. If you're having a good time here, please hit that subscribe and like, and let me know. I'm 11 weeks into making these, I'm having a blast, but I have no idea how anything works on YouTube, other than I do fun stuff and then I hit upload. So hopefully, we'll see you next week, right here, in the War Room.